Okay, friends, so we've been practicing, the meditation pretty intensely over the last 3 days. And yesterday I gave a talk about the Noble Eightfold Path, about how to balance and integrate the practice of mindfulness, meditation into the daily life. Now, I'm going to take you on a couple little journeys. Like little journeys? Okay, so these are descriptions of the process of life of the normal person. And the first is called the simile of the raft. So let's take an ordinary person and they want to go out in the countryside for a picnic, on a nice sunny day on a Saturday or Sunday, just to go out and mind their own business and, enjoy nature and, have a good time. So he goes out, the countryside, parks the car, and then starts taking a walk. And then after some time, all of a sudden there's a big earthquake. The ground is shaking and cracks splitting open and hair standing on end, and he runs and jumps over a few cracks, and then finally the earthquake stops and the ground stops shaking, and he says, "Phew, missed that one." And then he keeps on walking, and then a big flood, a tsunami comes. And so he runs and runs and tries to outrun the flooding water, finally reaches some higher ground and escapes the danger of the flood. And then he keeps on walking and he enters into a forest. Then all of a sudden there's a big forest fire. And the trees were dry and they're all, raging fire, and he runs to try to outrun the moving fire. And finally runs out of the forest on the other side, and escapes that and goes, whew. And then he keeps walking a little bit further, and all of a sudden a tornado comes and starts, pulling out, throwing up trees and rocks, and he hunkers down and tries to, miss all the flying debris. And finally that passes off. And again, whew. So now he kind of looking around to see if there's anything else, and he walks somewhat further, and all of a sudden 5 bandits jump out behind the rocks and chase him with their swords, threatening to cut off his head. So out of fear, he runs and runs and runs, and looking for some escape. Then he sees a village. I'll go in the village, I'll get some help, I'll go to the police. And he runs into the village, and empty village. Nobody there to help. Knocking on doors, no one there to help. And then finally he turns around and sees a ghost. The hair stands on end. And he runs out of the village. And then looking over his shoulder, running, and he comes down to a broad river. He keeps on looking on this side for the next danger, and I guess the ghost stopped chasing him. But and he looks on the other side of the river, and everything looks very peaceful. There's some coconut trees, and the sound of birds, and everything looks very peaceful on the other side. So an idea springs in his mind. If I can get over to the other side, cross this river, then I can escape these dangers and have peace. So, but can't swim. Realize he can't swim. What to do? So he looks around and he spies 8 logs sunk in the mud on the bank of the river. So an idea springs into his mind. And faith springs up in his mind. I can make a raft I'll pull those logs out, tie them together, I can make a raft, and I can cross that river. So with great effort, he goes down and pulls out the logs, and you know how logs, when they're stuck in the kind of the mud, they make a sucking sound like that. So with great effort, he pulls out these 8 logs, put them side by side, but then he has to tie them together. So he looks around, and there's some of the trees, he sees the vines. He says, oh, okay, I'll get these vines and I'll tie the logs together. So he does that, but then he forgot, I forgot how to tie my knots when I was a Boy Scout. And he tries to remember, okay, he figured out how to tie the raft together. And then he, again, with more effort, he pulls it down to the water's edge and launches it into the river and gets on, and then starts paddling with his hands out into the river. And after a short distance, piranha fish, biting his hands. Piranha, right? Or it could be a crocodile. Anyway, so he, that danger, so he keeps on paddling and with great effort and gets away from those man-eating fish. And then up ahead, he sees a whirlpool threatening to suck the raft down into a whirlpool. And so he has to be very alert and mindful and with more effort to steer the raft away from that whirlpool. But then out in the middle of the river, there's a sandbar. He doesn't want to get the raft stuck on a sandbar because then he'll be out in the middle of the river. Slow down his reaching the other side. So again, with great effort and concentration, and he keeps his eyes focused on the other bank and avoids the sandbar. And finally, he gets close to the other side. But then there's submerged tree trunks and branches, near the shore that the raft might get stuck on, so he can't actually reach the shore. So he looks around for a ford or, a little breach in the debris where he could get the raft in. So finally he sees one, and then he steers the raft toward that, and he finally then beaches the raft for the sandbank. And so he gets off the raft and stands on the firm ground, and there's cool breeze blowing, and then he sees his coconut trees, and there's coconuts up there, and there's some mango trees with ripe mangoes and papaya trees. And he says, oh, wow, what a relief, no more dangers. And so he picks some fruits and enjoys those fruits after a long, tiring paddle, enjoys the fruits of his labor or hers. And then he's going to take a walk, but then he thought, wow, this raft saved my life, should I carry it on my head and go for a walk? No, why don't I just leave it here, and then maybe somebody else can use it. So he leaves the raft there, and he walks on a little bit, and there's a hill, a hill. He climbs up on the hill, and he gets a 360-degree panorama of the whole countryside. And then there's some more palm trees, and he gets some palm fronds and builds himself a little thatched polatu, right? Sri Lankans polatu hut, a hut made from palm fronds. I had one in Sri Lanka. So then he builds himself a little hut and lives happily ever after. So that's the story. Now, how to match these up with the different aspects of the Dhamma that we find in Dhamma. So for the ordinary person, that could be you, any ordinary person that's seeking to live life with, and find some happiness and enjoy life and not to have constant dangers and trials and tribulations plaguing him. So then he comes upon those four natural elements, the earthquake. So the earthquake, the flood, the fire, and the tornado are symbolic or represent the four elements. Now, I didn't talk about the four elements too much, but all material matter in the world, the universe, including our bodies and everything else, are made up of those elements of earth, fire, water, and air. But basically, that means that there are cells, atoms, molecules, and electrons, because everything's made from that. And they're constantly changing. So the dangers of our own body, which is made up of the four elements, when those elements change, we grow old, the earth element starts to give problems, aching bones and so on, and the water element gets disturbed, and you get that certain problems with the imbalance and water element, and then the heat element, and also air. All of these, elements which are in the body, they're due to disruption and change and causing pain. So basically, people are plagued by that, and worries and fears about getting so many diseases and having other things, and are always constantly, having problems with their body or other things like that. It's not the way they want it, and so they want to change it, or the accidents. So then they, so they have to deal with that, and then the five robbers. What do you think the five robbers are? I mentioned that several times. No. The aggregates, the five aggregates. So that means form, feeling, perception, volition, and consciousness. Those are also, because of their nature, they're constantly changing. They're always giving us problems. Now, the body we already mentioned, so it's the same as basically the four elements. But then you have painful and pleasant feelings, and these are always changing beyond our control. And the painful feelings really cause us pain. And then because of the pleasant feelings don't last very long, we have to keep on grasping and creating other pleasurable feelings. And that's a time-exhausting process, because in that process of trying to search out pleasurable feeling, we get into a lot of problems too. We have to encounter unpleasant people, or we wind up, breaking the precepts and having to suffer on account of that because of our greed and so on. So these five skandhas, and even our perceptions, we get frightened by our own perceptions. Like, say you go into your garage, on a dark night or not too much light, and there's a coiled up garden hose, but you think it's a snake. You get frightened. Oh, it's just a garden hose. So anyway, even our perceptions, our faulty perceptions, cause us fear and worry. And then our volitional activities, all of our emotions and states like that we get sucked into, and just all of our wrong decisions that we make in our physical actions, breaking the precepts and everything. So these aggregates, because they're always changing, and even our consciousness. Sometimes we're happy, sometimes we're sad, sometimes we're confused, sometimes we're depressed. And these things also come largely out of our control, because there's causes and conditions for that. And most people don't know how to control those. So they, resort to pills, drugs, various sorts of things. And those also don't normally help too much in the long run. So then, because of all these dangers of just life and problems due to impermanence, the person runs for help, to drink, to drugs, to sex, to gambling, to any number of diversions, extreme sports, anything to kind of get their mind off of their worries and so on. They're running to all these various things, like running into the village for help. But most of these diversions that people take to find happiness only have a very short-lived thing, or again, in the case of dangerous sports, it kills them eventually, or many of them. So in this pursuit to get away from the dangers of life, people are trying to escape by all these different means. But in the end, they can't even control that. Like a person works for 20 years saving up the money to build a sailboat. They think, oh, with a sailboat, when I retire, I'm going to just sail the seven seas and, in my retirement till I die, and then, be free. So, after he gets or just before he finishes, the boat launch, maybe the bank forecloses and because he couldn't pay his loan and takes the boat away. Or he launches the boat and then, it sinks. Or he sails out on the ocean and, gets drowned or whatever. So like that. So, everything is impermanent. And then they realize there's nobody controlling anything. I've been praying to God for 40 years. Where is he at my time I need? And then, or other things, so many things. You tried everything and no one's in control. I tried medicine. I tried plastic surgery. I can't prevent old age. I mean, what's going on here? So then he sees a ghost. No self. You understand that there's no permanent being or owner of this body and mind. And it's just being blown about on the seas of life without an anchor, without an anchor. So the boat is just, if the wind blows from the south, the boat is blown to the north. If the wind blows from the east, the boat's blown to the west. Because there's no anchor. There's no one in control. So he runs to escape from that. That's when people ultimately, they search for religion, right? They try to find happiness and salvation in the material world with relationships, with money, or this and that. And ultimately, everything's going to end in death. And so finally, they turn to religion. They say, oh, now I better meditate. They've heard from meditation, or they heard of the Buddha's teaching for 30 or 40 years, and then because of society's pressures or other things, they never really kind of get into it, and they've tried everything else, drugs and shock therapies and other types of therapies and operations, and finally somebody says, you know what, you better go ask the Buddha. You've come to the end of your ropes. Why don't you try meditation? Anybody ever hear that? Yeah, try meditation. What? Meditation? Oh, that's from the devil. Certain people believe that. The Buddha, who is he? But finally, like, they reach the end of the ropes and they have no other choice. Okay, I'll go to a meditation course. I'll go learn meditation. Or start practicing Dhamma. So that's like coming to the river. So the person in life, he runs away, realizes there's no help in this impermanent world, really. And even so many self-help and self-taught religious saints or gurus, they wind up also, bringing ruin to a lot of people, and so on. So he comes to the river. So the river symbolizes it symbolizes the river of life. But the other bank symbolizes the freedom from the mind. That means the purification of the mind that's attained inner peace, and liberation from greed, hatred, and delusion. But then because he doesn't know how to swim, so, he hears about Buddhism. Finally, somebody says, you better read this. And you read this book, Breaking Through the Self-Delusion by Bhante Rahula. What? Oh my gosh. I'm going to go meditate. So they get faith. They read a Dhamma book or two, or they come to a lecture, by some visiting monk that's coming through town, and they hear about some hope with the Dhamma, and that you can save yourself. You don't have to wait around for the second coming of the Buddha or Jesus Christ or whatever other beliefs you may have, or a savior. I can actually do something about it myself. Dhamma, yes. And so you get that faith. The spiritual faculties are born. And then the 8 logs of the Eightfold Path that we went over, yesterday. So you have the faith springs up, and you get the effort. So the 5 spiritual faculties are faith, energy. So once you hear something new that can be done, and you get a lot of enthusiasm, then you have to generate that energy to practice. So that energy to pull the logs out of the river. It means to study and learn about it, learn how to tie them together. It means how to integrate them using mindfulness, and then developing mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom, which are the spiritual faculties: faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. These are the faculties of the mind that help us steer that raft across the river. What are the crocodiles and the piranha fish in the river that are trying to, bite our hands and cause us suffering or prevent us from being able to paddle? The sensual desires of so many different kinds. And getting sidetracked by false promises or other types of distractions just to titillate our senses, or to give us some temporary little satisfaction indulging in various things, but that prevents our ability to really develop our meditation practice. And then the whirlpools. What do the whirlpools signify? Anger and other dark emotions like depression, anger, jealousy, envy. We try to pull our mind down into dark states, but especially like depression, people winding up going insane, or other mental disorders. And, it's so rampant in a society, right? So anyway, with the mindfulness and the concentration, mindfulness, concentration, or wisdom, that means your focus is on the other bank. So even though you're trying to avoid the whirlpools and the piranhas and the sandbar, you have to have the goal in mind, the further shore. And the mindfulness helps you to avert the dangers, the present dangers, but you still have to have your mind on the shore, because you could go off track if you're not constantly have your attention. And then the sandbar. What's the sandbar? It's the I am conceit, pride, conceit, clinging to the ego. People get stuck on themselves, even thinking, oh, I'm a great meditator, or I'm better than, spiritually more advanced than somebody else. And, just various forms of that puffed up ego that do people in, because of that ego, they think there's something they're not, and then they wind up eventually going to rack and ruin, like we see with so many politicians and other people like that. So anyway, avoid getting stuck on the ego, and finally you reach near the other side, and then the submerged branches near the other shore. Those refer to the deeper unconscious contents of the mind that have still not been purified. Because in Dhamma practice, you could practice for 20, 30 years and gain some jhana, or gain even a first or second stage of enlightenment, but underneath that, there are even subtler fetters that are deeper down in the unconscious, like subtle pride, subtle ignorance, subtle restlessness, and things like that. So eventually you you learn to overcome those, and finally you get to the other side, which basically represents Nibbana, or it could represent any of those 4 stages of the Magga Phala, but especially the liberation. And then you enjoy the fruits, coconut water, mangoes, papaya. That means the fruit of liberation. That means you enjoy the mind being freed from guilt, worry, remorse, fear, free from greed, hatred, and all these strong, mental tendencies that, are the source of all of our, misery, basically, or unfulfilled potential. Keeps us just running around in circles, chasing our tail, like, cat or dog chasing its tail. We've seen Mita doing that in the kitchen. So a lot of people are like that. People are, they have one experience and then it vanishes. And so they want to create another, like a relationship, or get something else with sensual desire, thinking they're going to get happy by all of this kind of, relationships or other, surround yourself by all the new toys, technical toys, or brand new car, this yacht this person wanted to sail around the world in. So there's a little simile, another little story about that. So there was Mullah Nasruddin, who was I think, Islamic spiritual teacher. He wrote a little booklet. And there's a little story about that. So this Mullah Nasruddin, he was like a spiritual teacher, and he was doing a demonstration in front of his students. And he had a big bag of red hot chili peppers, the little small ones, but they really pack a punch. And he had that, and he was, up on a stage, and all of his students were down there. And he was, eating these. He wasn't telling them about what he was doing, but he kept on eating a chili pepper, and then tears were coming down, and he was trying to talk through all these tears and kind of grimaces, and the students were looking at him and said, Mullah, what are you doing? I'm trying to find a sweet one. Right? So people are trying to find something permanent and stable that's going to give them a source of happiness, in the material world, but because of impermanence, they, it's like chasing a mirage. And I'll tell you a story from my own experience again. Want to hear that? Okay, so when I was on my way to Sri Lanka, the very first time, I was still a layman, but I was into Dhamma. I had started yoga, and I was going to Sri Lanka to go to Kando Buddha, to practice meditation and to become a monk. So I was riding the ferry from Rameswaram to Talimanar. It doesn't exist anymore, but at that time, that was the way to go to Sri Lanka. And all these people from Sri Lanka went to India to buy stuff because the country had limited its imports, and people were struggling, especially to get like foodstuffs. And so they were going to India to buy all this kind of stuff and take it back on the ferry, and then on the train back to Colombo. So I was pretty naive in those days with India and all that. So anyway, we get to Talimanar in Sri Lanka, and then we have to take the train, about a 6 or 8 hour ride. And the train was full. And the only place I could find to kind of sit down was in a kind of the back part of one train car where people had stowed their baggages and so on. And there was a big gunny bag there, full of something. I didn't know what it was, but it was in a place where, I could, sit down and kind of lean up against the gunny bag and use it kind of as a pillow and at least try to sleep for 1 or 2 hours. So I did that. Then I woke up, my head was on fire. My head was almost swollen. That bag was full of red chilies. And I didn't know it. Really, it's a true story. So you know, watch out for those chilies. So I got off the train and had to go, to a little pond and soak my head in. The swelling went down. Okay, so anyway, that's the story of the the simile of the raft. And that once we reach the other side, we don't need to carry the raft on top of our head, like use the Dhamma in order to, debate people in Dhamma talks or become rich or famous or other types of things. But we use it to cross the ocean. Its purpose is to cross the ocean, not to get in arguments about or debate other people or to make it a burden for ourselves. We use it to cross the ocean. That was the Buddha's advice. Okay, now this comes to another story. Okay, once again, it's a person who hasn't started meditation yet, but they live in a village at the base of a mountain. In Europe, like those Oberstdorf and some other villages, or in India. Anyway, a village at the base of a fairly tall mountain. And the person never bothered climbing the mountain before. That was too much work. And but he had a friend who was, kind of into meditation. This friend had been talking to him for a long time. You really ought to try meditation, try some yoga. The person said, yeah, okay, next month. And that went on for several years. He just never wanted to put forth the effort. So finally, the friend comes over again on a nice day early in the morning and says, come on, I'm going to climb the mountain. Come on, let's go for a hike. It's really a nice day. And this guy kind of, yawns and says, okay, kind of last resort, and just to get rid of the guy so the guy's not bugging him anymore, right? So, okay, I'll go for the walk. So when he gets up and goes out, starts walking down the alleyway toward the footpath that starts going up the mountain. And it's early morning and there's a lot of, mangy dogs running through the alleyways, in the trash cans and looking for food, and dogs barking at each other, and the smell of garbage, and, the sound of the people getting up and working, driving, the sound of traffic. But anyway, so, he walks along that alley and finally starts walking up the mountain. And as he gets above the treetops or gets above the rooftops, already the sounds are getting a little bit less and the smell is not so bad. He keeps on walking up and up. And after some time, maybe a few hundred feet, he pauses and, looks out and he starts seeing, a wider area of the town, come from above, a panoramic picture, and he says, wow, it's a little bit different. And, the smell's not so bad, the sounds are getting less and less. And so he keeps on walking up, and every few hundred feet, he stops. There might be a bench there, and to look out and sees a wider and wider view. And finally he gets up near the top, not even at the very top, but maybe, 3/4. There's a nice bench there, and he sort of sits down, with his friend and looks out, surveys this panorama. And he goes, wow, look at over there. There's a clear lake with swans swimming. I never knew that. Well, the next day on a hot summer day, I'm going to go for a swim. So he saw something he never saw before, didn't know about. Then as he's looking around, he said, wow, there's another way to go to my job without having to encounter, construction detours and potholes and so much traffic. So he sees a different way to go that doesn't have so much traffic. Then there's another road, a quicker way to go to the supermarket. See smaller little roads without so many stop signs. Then he says, there's a new way to go to Uncle Joe's house, Aunt Millie's house. 3 or 4 times a year they go for reunions. I can, take a shorter way, or at least a more scenic way. And so like that, he starts seeing more potential for living in that town that he didn't know before. But he can't stay up on a mountain forever. So he has to start going back down. And as he starts going back down, that panorama, kind of closes up. But he's still thinking about that cool lake, He wants in that shortcut to go to his work in the morning so he doesn't get late. And so as he goes down, that panorama closes more and more and more. And he gets back down and after walking through the alleyway, and one of the stray dogs comes running after him to try to bite his pant leg, and he runs to get away from that, and then he almost steps in a pile of garbage, and he has to avoid that. And finally, he gets back into his house, and he'd been gone a few hours, and so he races to his computer to check his email, and very quickly forget all about the mountain. And gets busy back doing his daily work. And then next day or two, it's temperature soars up to 90 or 100 degrees, and the electricity goes out in the village or in his neighborhood, and the AC doesn't work, and he's sitting there sweating on his in his house, and wondering what the heck to do. And then, there's a lake here. I remember that lake. Where is it? Okay, I gotta remember, where was that lake at? He looks it up in some yellow pages or something, or on the internet, finds out where the lake is, and goes to the lake and has a nice cool swim, and feeds the swan some bread, and gets out and lays under a tree and has a nice time. He said, I gotta remember this one. This is great. Then goes back home and then gets back into his work. But then when he gets stuck in the next traffic jam, he remembers there was another road. There was another road to drive to work or to Uncle Joe's house. So like that, he starts remembering these things that he saw from up on the mountain, and then starts using them to enjoy or to make life in the city a little bit more bearable. So this basically is a simile of, a retreat, especially for people who hadn't been on a retreat very often, or not at all, or not very often, or maybe you haven't been for quite a long time. It's your first retreat. And so it's like climbing the mountain is like climbing the mountain of our body and mind. So, you're sitting there and you kind of develop that, just sitting, breathing, sitting, just watching the body sitting and breathing. That's sort of like climbing the mountain of the body and mind. You get that panoramic viewpoint. The head, the arms, the feet, feeling the sensations, breathing, being able to, hear the sounds without being so disturbed. And as you develop concentration, the mind stops reacting so much. You start to feel some piti, some pleasant sensations in the body. You're no longer being disturbed by people making noises in the meditation hall or other disturbances, and you start to enjoy your own mind. All the neurotic thoughts start getting a little bit weaker and weaker, and finally you reach some state of nice concentration, and you wish, I wish I could stay like this forever. But the same way with the mountaintop, you can't stay in the retreat forever. Right? So like today, you gotta go home. You jump in your car, 4th of July traffic, right? So, you get close to Baltimore or Philadelphia or wherever you're going, and It gets up to 90 degrees. Maybe your AC in your car goes off, doesn't work. You get into a traffic jam, and then you start noticing your mind getting agitated. And you can try to remember, oh, okay, just relax. Come back, take a 3-part breath. Yeah. So you start to remember some of the things you might have learned on the retreat. You don't have to just always have a stiff, old, painful body. You can do some yoga exercise. You don't always have to be, have a weak breath and so on. You can practice 3-part breathing. You don't always have to rush from place to place. You can do some walking meditation. So like that, as you start to integrate and incorporate some of these things that you've learned in the retreat, hopefully you'll be able to, live in your own body and mind and in the area in a more peaceful way, not fighting so much, not having so much stress and anxiety because you know how to deal with the situations. And if at work, you're starting to get upset, you can just pause and do an M&M, which I'm going to talk about next. Or, just take some 3-part breaths, tell yourself to relax, come to the present moment, and so on. So like that, you can use some of those things you used in the retreat to live in your own body and mind more comfortably. Now, this comes down to sort of the actual how to integrate meditation practice into daily life. Because you come on a retreat, everything is kind of done for you, right? Meals are prepared, teachers giving guided meditation, giving you instructions, and you have a schedule, and you're in a group, so you kind of force yourself to get up early in the morning. Maybe you wouldn't have got up so early at home, but because you're in a group situation and self-conscious, the teacher's watching you, so somehow you force yourself to sit for the whole meditation period, and the teacher's watching you. Don't move. So anyway, you somehow you're able to go through the retreat, and hopefully get some benefit from that. To feel some benefit from doing deep, slow breathing, from doing some stretches before sitting to meditate, and sit a little bit longer without so much pain. Some of the other kind of meditation practices and so on, tuning into the present moment, vibrations. So usually at the end of a retreat, so you get enthused in the retreat, and then maybe some people already started to write down, okay, I'm going to practice meditation twice a day. I'm going to get up at 5:30 in the morning, do some yoga and meditation, and so they're already kind of trying to map out how they're going to practice the Dhamma. And so normally most meditation teachers will advise their students, ideally you should practice meditation twice a day, because doing it in the morning will help prepare your mind and body for the day ahead, help you to be more centered and relaxed, hopefully, so when things happen, you get so stressed out so quickly or easily. And so, and the evening meditation, because the morning meditation, the effects of that are going to wear off within 2 or 3 hours, especially if you have to work and you're encountering all the stresses of most jobs and so on. That calmness or centeredness probably would be gone by noontime. And then the evening time, by the time you get home, you'd have accumulated probably more stress. And so the evening meditation has helped to let go of that one, to let go of that other stress that may have been accumulated. And especially like practicing forgiveness and metta in the evening. Because you might have encountered people that did something to you didn't like, or, and you're holding some resentment or grudges about that, some ill thoughts. And so instead of, plotting revenge, how you're going to get even to these people. You can send them metta, and contemplate. Well, these people, they're all so sick. They have their own problems at home. Give them a break. So let them be well and happy. Forgive them for what they did to you, or forgive yourself. Maybe you made some mistake during the day, use some rough language to somebody, so you can even forgive yourself, because most people starting to meditate, or even people who are intermediate stages, we're all like babies still learning to walk. You take a few steps, you stumble, fall down, you get back up, and keep on going. So we have to learn how to also forgive ourselves if we made mistakes, but make the determination to not keep repeating those mistakes. Anyway, so a person might be able to, when they go home, practice meditation, maybe twice a day for a while, or maybe do some yoga, maybe for a few days. Maybe some of you had to get somebody to cover your job at work. So maybe somebody worked for you like yesterday or something. So now in the next few days, they might ask you to work overtime to cover their job. And so you start to get busy. Then usually what happens after a few days or a week, evening meditation would be the first one. You let go of that, because maybe you've been working too hard, you're tired, and so on, and picking up stress, there's excuses, and so usually the evening meditation you let go of. And then the morning meditation, maybe you do that again for several days, but then gradually the 45-minute meditation drops to 30 minutes because of just getting restless again and getting busy, and then 30-minute meditation drops to 15 minutes after a couple of weeks. Then before you know it, you're swigging down your last cup of coffee, you're going out the door, and you pat the Buddha on the head and say, "You meditate for me." And that's all your meditation. Right? I've seen that happen, even in my own practice in the beginning. But there's so many people who have been teaching for 45 years, and even when you come back 20 years later, and they're still having, So people tend to use meditation as a crutch, when they're feeling bad. When they're feeling good, then it's easy to kind of let it go. But that's the wrong attitude, because meditation should be a prevention, not a cure. We do it to prevent our mind from getting into difficulties, not to cure it once you've gotten into difficulties, or your body. So like yoga. And a lot of people ask, how much yoga, how much meditation should I do? Because how do I divide up my time? I only got 1 hour, right? You determine you got 1 hour in the morning. You can, get up a little bit earlier. How much yoga and meditation? Well, that's dependent on each person, but as a general rule of thumb, I would do the yoga for 20 minutes and meditation for 40 minutes, or 1/3 and 2/3, or 10 minutes of yoga, 30 minutes of meditation. Because ultimately, meditation is going to bring you more benefit than the yoga. And you can combine the meditation with like the 3-part breathing in the beginning, so you're doing 2 things at one time, actually. But anyway, that's just, kind of a general rule of thumb. Each person can adjust that to their own. But more people are interested in yoga because it gives them something physical to do, and they think that they're actually making progress. And then meditation is more difficult, controlling their mind and so on. So they tend to want to do more yoga and less meditation. But actually, it should be at least the same. But anyway, but even though you have good intentions to do that, continue a daily practice, most people have struggled to maintain it. And that's why they keep on having to come back to retreats all the time, to get a battery charge. Or they get into a tough time, I got to go on a retreat, But So if you have trouble meditating for longer, that's why we've come up with a new kind of meditation called an M&M. And M&M stands for a minute meditation. So it's an acronym for, M&M candies. They're little, they're small, but they're sweet. So an M&M is a minute meditation, and it's short and sweet. But it's a specific practice that you train yourself to stop every hour during the day for at least 1 minute. You just pause. Usually it's between various activities. You finish one little errand before rushing to another, stop. And what you do is you just pause and freeze in your tracks. Best time to do it even while you're standing, or sitting after you've finished one thing. Just to pause before rushing and take a deep 3-part breath. And hold the breath in for 4 or 5 seconds and just touch base with that present moment. Because when you take in the deep, slow breath, holding in the breath, you really can't think about other things because it really consumes all of your attention. And by the time you've let out the breath, you might have forgotten what you were rushing to do next even, or at least you feel more relaxed. Or you could take 2 or 3 of those breaths. I mean, even just 3-part breaths in the 6x3 rhythm is already a minute. It's 3-part breaths. And so that's a minute of meditation already. That means while you're doing that, your mind is mostly just in the present moment. Or you could also practice forgiveness in that 1 minute, especially if somebody wronged you in that previous hour. Instead of carrying it over to the next hour, you can, send them metta, or forgive them, or forgive yourself, so you don't carry that stress into the next hour. So the M&Ms are like releasing stress hour by hour rather than accumulating it like so many people do, because they never stop to pause and they're just rushing around the whole day long. So that's why doing these M&Ms is very powerful, because in that 1 minute you can relax, and then you can carry on into the next hour, hopefully, and to deal with what happens in the next hour. But then you try to do it, every hour by setting a beeper on your watch or some other indications. So many people kind of doing that kind of thing now. There's insight timers and other apps I think people use. So the idea behind the 1 minute meditation is that, again, you learn to create a pause between your various activities, because usually we just keep rushing through the day and not stopping. So it helps to release the stress hour by hour. And then hopefully by the end of the day, you won't feel so stressed out, or you won't feel the need to stop at the bar and have a martini or something, or a beer to kind of relax, like a lot of people do. And then you might feel refreshed enough to actually do an evening meditation, a longer evening meditation. And then when you do an evening meditation, you might have a better sleep, and you wake up in the morning more refreshed and feel like doing the morning meditation. So, especially the practice of doing these M&Ms, it's especially important for people that, have stopped doing their longer meditations in the morning, or daily meditations. But even if you just continue to meditate twice a day, morning and evening, doing these every hour during the day will help keep up that battery charge. So the M&Ms are like a mini charge. You've heard of mini charges, right? For your cell phone and stuff like that. So it's a mini charge, 1 minute, just stop and pause. Take 3 breaths in the 6x3 or the 8x4, or breathing ratio, or whatever you can comfortably do. Send out metta, just something like that, just to, let go of whatever was eating on your mind in that hour, or just try, just come back and feel the subtle vibrations of the present moment. Just come back to just breathing in, standing, breathing out, standing, hearing, thinking. And that will bring back kind of all of your kind of Dhamma understanding in that one minute. And then you can kind of, reinforce your mind with that, so that when something happens in the next hour, you'll be more ready to say, okay, don't get excited. This has happened. Just relax, and calmly observe your reaction. Don't immediately blurt out some bad language to somebody who's annoying you, or do some other foolish thing. So that the M&Ms every hour help you to maintain at least enough mindfulness to make it to the next hour, without totally losing it. And then maybe take a slow walk from your desk to the coffee making machine, or whatever. And then the lunch break at work, try to eat in silence if you can. Or I know that's probably difficult for most people who work in a company with other people. But anyway, so doing those things are all ways that we can practice the Dhamma in the daily life. Because that's really where the rubber meets the road. That's where you create 90% of your bad karma, is out there on the street. Whether it's in your family conditions, at the work site, traveling, social interactions, that's where you're able to get into wrong speech, or get influenced by others to want to break your precepts, or take a drink, or whatever other things you might have been doing, because there's so many people out there in the world that don't want you to change. So people are always luring us to go back to our old ways, because they don't want to look bad, so that they want everybody to act the way they do, so that the world looks normal, right? So there's a lot of temptations out there in the world that we have to be strong to avoid getting sucked back into our old habits, if that's in fact what you want to do. If you want to change the way that you live and think and so on. Now, even with the 1 minute meditations, there's other times during the day where you might have even just 5 seconds, 10 seconds, 15 seconds here or there, where of kind of idle time, but like standing around waiting in lines for something, right? Usually you get occupied, look around the office, the pictures, or look through the magazines, or criticize somebody's behavior next to you, or somebody coming in the door, what are they wearing that for? Anyway, we let our minds just get carried away, because that's just its habit. Or you're standing in line at the checkout counter in the grocery. That's a good one, right? So you're standing in line, 15 items or less. Then somebody with a full cart, comes in, maybe you delayed walking forward and they saw there was a couple feet. You open your eyes and this person's trying to wedge in there. You can see your reaction, right? So you can check yourself. And so you're standing in line, and then maybe the cashier is fumbling with the tape, maybe it's not working properly. People are getting upset. Send metta. Send metta to the cashier, the others who are getting frustrated. May all beings be well and happy. Take a few deep, slow breaths. And then maybe your eyes start to wander over to the magazine rack. Michael Jackson is we let our eyes get carried away. So keep them in your head and just, do some 3-part breathing. I mean, 3-part breathing, really, it's a miracle pill. If there was any miracle pill in the world, it's 3-part breathing. Just knowing how to do that, and especially having trained your lungs to be able to take a slower, deeper breath, holding it in. I mean, it's really better than any drug, almost for all situations, and so on. And it's free, and it's easily doable anytime. So anyway, that's the way we have to incorporate. these kind of things into our daily life, because life is, fast-paced and stressful. So we need every available little free seconds here or there, put it to use. And no better way to put it to use is to come back to the present moment and just calm your mind, break that push to the future, or get out of that negative thought. Just come back, hold the breath in, relax. Just remember anything about the Dhamma you can bring to mind quickly. Everything's impermanent. Relax. So this is how we have to practice the Dhamma. And we can make Dhamma fun. A lot of people think practicing Dhamma, I can't do this, I can't do that, I can't, drink, I can't play around, they think like that, right? But you can make Dhamma fun by, you can practice walking meditation down the supermarket aisle. You're looking for your box of, Cheerios or something, step by step. And you come to the line and you're mindfully looking up and looking for Cheerios, and you see one box left, and you start to, lifting, stretching out, and all of a sudden an unknown hand from over here comes racing out and grabs the last box of Cheerios. Emptiness. Have fun with the Dhamma. Yeah, please take it. We got kids at home, they like Cheerios. Come on, take it. So, let them cut in line in front of you. You're in a hurry? Okay, yeah, I can wait a few extra minutes. Come on. Practice compassion. So like that, there's a lot of ways that you can have fun with the Dhamma. And because all those little things, they add up, Not just sitting for 1 hour in a jhana, and coming out and experiencing a lot of bliss, but then you come out and after a while you're running around again. But all these little moments are more important, or at least they add up. So it's not the length of time that you practice meditation, but it's the quality that you practice. Because most people, if they're honest, beginners especially, if you sit for 30-minute meditation, probably most people, if they're lucky, 2 or 3 minutes of that, they'll actually be concentrated. The rest of the time, they're going in and out of drowsiness, or they're, getting lost, carried away in their thoughts. So the M&Ms, if you can do that every hour during the day, you got 12 minutes of quality meditation. If you can do that between 8 in the morning, 8 in the evening, or whatever. So anyway, these are just some things I wanted to leave with you to try to take home and integrate these aspects of the Dhamma practice. So does anybody have any last questions they might want to ask? Don't be shy. Huh? M&Ms, you think you can do that? 1 minute an hour? I'll check in 2 years and let me know. Somebody started to raise their hand. Yeah. Well, awareness is consciousness, but there's a difference. Consciousness is basically the knowing faculty. It's basically like the light in your mind that allows you to hear, see, taste, smell, touch, watch your thoughts. It's like the light in the room. If this room was totally dark, you can't see anything. You walk around, you'll bump into everything and hurt yourself. But the light comes on. So the light is our consciousness. But when you sleep, you lose your consciousness, right? So when you're sleeping at night, you're dead to the world for the most part. You have dreams maybe, but still, that's because the consciousness has been cut off from the senses. Now you're still conscious in an unconscious way with dreams and so on. Or it's consciousness is kind of just sleeping at that point, resting. But as soon as you wake up, then so consciousness is the knowing, what we call the knowing faculty. But there's always the ego behind it. In an unenlightened person, there's always the sense of self there. And, or the idea that I am doing this, I am somebody. But awareness, the way that I like to use the terms, is when that sense of I and me gets a little bit less, and when that subject-object awareness starts to become more space, and you're able to just feel and observe things coming and going, then it starts to become awareness rather than consciousness, because there's not so much ego behind it. There's not so much reactive resistance to things and things like that. So, but awareness is consciousness, and consciousness is awareness, but there's different degrees of that. Just like there's a different degrees of a flashlight. If you have weak batteries, in a room, okay, you can see some things, but it's not really clear, right? And then if you got a fully new batteries in there, then it's very bright. Things are much more clear. So with awareness, there's much more clarity, because our reactive consciousness blurs that clarity, and we're just, the mind gets confused, and it's because it's rushing around. It's very contracted. So that's what I usually. Now, other teachers may tell you something totally different, but that's the way I like to interpret it. Any other questions? So, did everybody think they learned something during this retreat? What did you learn? Yeah, but that was only in the last 10 minutes. 3-part breathing? Huh? Okay. Stretch? How many people like that one? I mean, that's great. I mean, anytime that's one of the best ones. I mean, because you do that, cracking the fingers gets the energy moving in there, and when you stretch your hands up, that draws the air all the way up into the upper chest, and it's so easy, Then also standing meditation. Most people hardly ever teach about standing meditation, but it's very powerful, because you can't go to sleep while you're standing. I mean, some people try to, but normally, you have to stay more awake because of the fear of falling down. So people that have fear of pain, or more pain in sitting, they can do more standing. You can get very concentrated even when standing. I wouldn't say concentrated in that the normal sense of like focusing on one point, but the word concentration is kind of misunderstood a lot, because there's two ways you can concentrate. One is to focus on a particular object. Let's say if you're trying to just focus on the little touch of air as it's going through the nostrils, and then if you can totally keep your attention there, then you'll lose awareness of things going on around you. You get totally absorbed in that. So that's one of the classical ideas of concentration, but that's not the kind of concentration that the Buddha talked about, really, and especially in practicing mindfulness. The other one is that we use an object in order to overcome the 5 hindrances. I mean, the main purpose in concentration is to overcome the 5 hindrances. So you use an object for that, such as the breathing. But once you've overcome the hindrances, and the mind has come to the present moment, it doesn't need the object anymore. The mind becomes one-pointed. That means it's resting in the present moment, even without an object. Although things will be coming and going, but the mind is not moving. The mind is still. And objects are coming and going, but the mind is not moving. So that is called the vipassana jhana. And that's what we try to develop when we're practicing mindfulness, by not losing the awareness of body and things around us, but we're using that still point inside as the anchor. That's the critical difference. Now, the average person, they don't have that still point or anchor for the present moment. So their mind is just, willy-nilly, erratic and reacting to everything and not centered. And that's the reason, because they're not centered. But once you get the centeredness through this kind of breathing, especially that's more centered in the body and the body itself, and you learn how to rest the mind in that, that becomes that's a concentrated state. But you still have awareness. You can still hear sounds, even observe thoughts coming and going. Thoughts aren't the problem. It's getting lost in your thoughts that are the problem. Thoughts are not the problem. It's getting carried away in them and believing in your thoughts, theories, right? These are weird theories going on, people clinging to their opinions. But it's being a slave to our thoughts. So thoughts are just like bubbles floating through the mind. They don't belong to awareness. Thoughts are not part of awareness. Thoughts are different than that. Those are sankharas. Those are mental states and thoughts. So you can actually be aware of thoughts and they won't bother you because you're aware of other things too. And that's how you see, that's how you are able to realize that everything is just constantly changing and there's no self behind that. It's just awareness. You start to understand that awareness is awareness and it doesn't need you or a self about it. It's perfect by itself. But you can still live your life and be aware of the thought of I, but you don't buy into it. And it's like there's this awareness there, and there's this little self or me that's doing things, but you keeping your distance. You don't get sucked into it and buy into all of its nonsense. And that's really the ideal development of the practice. But that, of course, only realizes when you've realized the stages of, the four path and fruits. I see a hand go up. Who's preparing lunch today? Anybody? Is he down there? It's about 11:15. Okay. Yes. That's why we say just knowing. When the known disappears and the knower disappears, there's the knowing. And that's what that happens in the state of jhana. And that's and the vipassana jhana. When you reach that level, you're in vipassana jhana. Or even if the self hasn't totally disappeared, if there's a great enough distance and detachment to it, where there's no kind of neurotic thinking and so on, and you're in touch with a subtle vibration, and there's awareness of very clear, bright awareness, that's also vipassana jhana.
So it's tremendous of this idea of our being disintegrated, right?
Only it's not disintegrated totally. You see through it. It's like transparent. The sense of I is there, but it's like just transparent. Before it feels like it's something really real, but now you see it as like transparent. So you're not deluded by it. because the hallmark of the Sotapanna is simply they overcome the delusion of a self. They don't overcome the self totally. They overcome the belief in a self, in a permanent self or I or soul. But now you've seen through it, you know it's an illusion, but still, because of the force of habit and so on, it's still lingering there in the background. So sometimes you might start to get carried away, but you become very aware of it very quickly, and it won't cause you to break any of the major precepts or do anything extremely foolish. You'll gain your senses more quickly because of that. And then with the other stages, that gradually gets less and less and less. Once you what?
So let's say you catch yourself thinking about distractions or thoughts.
Yeah.
And you try to bring back attention. It takes that judgment that comes with it. How do you
Just know that it's a judgment. Just be aware of judging. If you're judging, this is good or this is bad. Just judging, you observe it, and let go of just even that. But it's difficult because these are, it's all a training, and it takes years and years and years to be able to do that. What kind of feelings? That's not a feeling. You have to distinguish. Feelings are just pleasant or painful feelings. They're not thoughts, they're feelings. Perceptions and thoughts that's your identification of the feeling, but it's not the feeling itself. So a lot of people use this word feeling in English, a feeling means, I'm feeling depressed. Well, depression is not a feeling in Buddhism, psychology. It's an emotion, or it's a mental state. But of course, the feeling is yucky. Being depressed has a kind of a painful sense to it, but still, the feeling is just the unpleasant part of it. But what you're identifying as me, I'm depressed and all that, that's part of the sankhara. Vedana, yes. Okay, friends, I think we'll bring this retreat to a close now. And you took the 8 precepts, the 8 lifetime precepts at the beginning, but I think it's better you just keep the 8 time life precepts for a lifetime. That's why they're called 8 lifetime precepts, because it doesn't involve not eating at night or not watching shows. I mean, those are the 8 monastic precepts. But what we've been taking are simply the Eightfold Path, the recommendations for lay people living a lay life, and especially those 3 with speech, or especially those 2 with speech. A lot of people say, well, I don't tell lies, but I'll talk about others. And then your friends get angry with you for spilling their secrets and all kind of problems, right? Or using harsh speech, shouting at people, or telling crude jokes, colored jokes and all that. Like blue jokes. So anyway, that's why those are important. So yeah, regarding those things up there, you're welcome to take the diagram of the 5 aggregates if you want to, and if you want to have the e-file of the yoga papers, you can sign your email address there. And also, I have books I have 3 books that are on Amazon. I have a page on Amazon, and one of the books is the wonderful, the magnificent, the masterful teachings of Gautama Buddha, which I just finished re-editing. a couple months ago, and it's there, as well as Breaking Through the Self-Delusion. And that little mind-body connection book is available on a Kindle. And within a couple of months, I hope to have my autobiography updated and republished on there too. So if you're interested in any of those, you can just, put, Amazon books and my name, Yogavachara Rahula, or monthly Yogavachara Rahula, should take you to that page. All right. So it was nice having all of you. You're a good group, and I wish you all the best. And come again if you feel the need. You can come on self-retreat too. I don't want to make this, I don't have constant retreats all the time. So just maybe 4 or 5 a year. But people can come on self-retreat, in which they would, meditate with the people who are here, like myself and anybody else. A morning and evening, we have our daily meditation practice. And then between those times, people are free to meditate on their own, read or study, and adjust their schedule as they need to, maybe help out doing an hour or so of some work around the center, Okay.